We are joined today by Joe, version 2. Joe, thanks for coming on, first of all, as I said. And could you maybe just give, like, for people that don't know you personally, maybe before we get into, version 2.
Yeah.
How did you get involved in online marketing? How long have you been in online marketing? What was your point?
A while, as you can probably tell from the grey hairs. So I got into online marketing really by accident, as I think a lot of people do end up in this kind of career. I went to university, studied ocean science, so kind of doing scuba diving and playing with turtles and all that kind of cool stuff for a few years. Came out of that and thought, well, there's no real jobs that pay any money in this amazing kind of save the world kind of world. So fell into online sales. So this was back in maybe 15 years ago, 12 years ago, a long time anyway. And there was companies who were all trying to transition from print advertising into digital. So I went into media sales really for a print company at the time, but they were just transitioning into digital, which is really good timing. So I went in as a sales guy for them, and very quickly found that actually I could probably talk to their advertisers about online much better than some of the more senior established guys in that organization, because I've grown up with it and been part of that kind of journey. And then kind of went from that role into content marketing. So there's a company in Bath called Content Click. This was going back like 2013, 2014, that I came in as a sales director. And we were a content recommendation network. So we'd have widgets that would sit on news articles and serve up relevant content for their audience, but those are sponsored ads. So we grew that network fairly heavily over the course of 2 to 3 years, sold it to a US company called Rev Content, and then I sat as their kind of UK managing director for a few years, running their European business, and thought, hey, I've kind of been around the block now a little while, got some good contacts, think I know roughly what I'm doing, although it's all changing, and I should really start doing this for myself. So that's how I got to version 2, and then version 2 started about 2.5 years ago. And
where does the name version 2 come from? Is it literally like this is the second, this is my second attempt, or
No, I think it's version 1 sucks at everything, and it's really just a ethos that I have in business, and I hope that my team kind of share, in that anything we're doing can be made better. So let's not get our egos involved as to what we're building and how we're doing it. Really, let's just agree that whatever we're putting out there and whatever marketing we're doing, whatever work we're doing, can always be improved upon. And that's kind of the idea behind version 2, is whatever we're doing now, let's use that as a control, but let's always try and beat it. So even if we've got campaigns that are absolutely flying, doing amazingly well for us, doing amazingly well for our clients, how can we improve it? How can we make a second version of this to try and beat that?
Okay, nice. That makes a lot of sense. And so where are you guys at now as a business? You're based down near Bath, is that right?
Yes, yeah, based out of Box House, which is so Box is a village about 3 miles from Bath. Yeah, beautiful part.
For our millions of international viewers,
exactly,
Bath is in the West Country of the UK, not a million miles away from where I was born. Actually, I was born in Bristol.
Yeah. But, I'm a Bristol boy as well. So yeah.
Okay. And so how many people are now in version 2?
9 at the moment. 7 in-house, kind of full-time, although working from home, and then a couple who are remote, globally. And most of those either in kind of business development or media buying functions. So that's kind of what we're doing day to day, is a lot of performance media buying for clients in the UK and internationally.
Got it. So let's sort of drill into that then. Like you guys are intent-based marketing, content-based marketing. What does that mean for the layman? If you were explaining to a friend at a wedding, what does that mean?
For us, we do advertising through content, but content that drives some kind of performance or some kind of action that advertisers actually care about, right? There's loads of agencies out there doing amazing work and producing really cool content, but it's kind of content for content's sake. Look at this really cool kind of, graph we've done, or this infographic, and there's no real, measure of the success of that. So what we do is we produce content, and we produce articles and advertorials with a view to drive users from online websites or from social media, but really for them to take action that the client is interested in, whether that be generate a lead, whether that be generate a sale or purchase, an app download. It's let's use content as the medium, but use it in a way that makes the user take some kind of action that the advertisers then pay us for.
Got it. So you're bringing people into presumably like quite a considered purchase. They're finding it. They're at the kind of research stage of thinking about a mortgage or something similar like that, and you're providing information that essentially leads them down into the funnel to then make a purchase.
Yeah, precisely. Sometimes they're not even in the consideration stage. We use a lot of kind of native advertising platforms. So the users are typically surfing big, news and content websites. So in the UK, the Mirror, Sky, Sun. US will be CNN and Fox News. So they're kind of consuming news and editorial content. We then provide them hopefully interesting content that's relevant to what they're reading about, but it leads on to some kind of quote or lead form. So we'll explain the pain points around a certain thing, whether it's getting a new mortgage at the moment and how interest rates are really low because of what's going on in the economy. And if you're not remortgaged in a couple of years, here's now a really good time. And, this is what the rates are looking like. And if you wanted to see if you could get a really good deal, it only takes 30 seconds on this online calculator. And, that's kind of what we do, is take people from A to B, but do it fairly organically rather than typical kind of DR advertising, which is, hey, we've got a sale on 50% off. We're not really about that at all.
So within that, then, I mean, where would you put, if you had to draw a pie chart of, the creative aspect, the analytical aspect of finding out how do you turn this art into a science of bringing people through and producing engaging stuff that is going to make me go the way with, because content is being produced, all the time by everyone. What is it that is part of your secret sauce of kind of getting people through that?
Yeah, tough. Lots of split testing. And lots of, but we're here really because advertisers struggle to do it, whether it be in-house or through their other media agencies. And there's a lot of, I guess, art or science to producing articles or producing content that takes people on these journeys, where they're then giving away, their details or, buying something online. That's difficult. We split test everything. So we have a lot of tools and a lot of tech in place to determine, we're running articles. What's the best headline for this user? What's the best images? What's the intro paragraphs? How should we lay it out? What's it look like on mobile? Do we do different designs per operating system, per device, per country? We do a lot of that. But before all that, it's really just, into the mentality of what the user's online to do. Because typically, we're distributing content via native ads or via social. So we're disturbing their kind of user journey, but we want to do it kind of sympathetically to what they're online to then do. Whether they're reading news content, whether they're browsing their Facebook feed, let's be cognizant of that journey and say, hey, how do we produce content that feels seamless to them at this moment in time? And most brands don't. Most brands have that secondary to, hey, let's produce a sales page that we can, really showcase how we're 40% off this weekend only. And then they almost force it into the media placements. We work backward and say, hey, what is the media that we're purchasing? What's that user going through at the moment in time? How do we then produce, sponsored messaging that looks like it should fit here?
So the kind of curation of that sort of feng shui of getting people, rather than jumping into a cold bath, it's kind of leading people through that. You mentioned
the idea being, I guess.
Sorry. No, you mentioned the A/B testing and testing all of these aspects of creatives. How much, within that kind of pie chart, when you think about what makes a successful campaign, and obviously kind of your company name gives an indication of this, presumably you put huge emphasis on the continued process of endless testing, I assume.
Yeah, always. And it's, when we were first raising money as a business and kind of going through the business plan, and even the first 6 to 12 months, one of the questions I always got asked by our investors was, hey, why don't you just stop testing? You'll be X amount more profitable because you got all the stuff that works, and then you're always losing money on top of that. And I'm like, well, not. I'm basically, the day I stop testing is the day, the business starts to go downhill, because there's always going to be innovation and there's always going to be people looking to do better things. We spend budget every single day on stuff we didn't know was going to work or not, but really just to try and move the dial. And it's all these marginal gains. If we can find 5% improvement on our landing page click-through because we find a better headline, or if we find that we split test different images on the article based on different age brands that are coming through, and we find 2% there, it all adds up. And, every test you do isn't going to work. And probably more often than not, they don't, because you've already got a fairly optimized page when you start. And, you test 3 different headlines and 2 of them bomb, and you're down kind of 30%. But then you find one that improves it, and then you're up, and that one carries on. For us, it's finding those marginal gains. And over the course of, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, they do really stack up. But yeah, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of resource.
Yeah. And so what would be like example clients and verticals that work well within a kind of native environment?
Historically, lots of financial services and lead generation companies. So that's kind of our bread and butter. We work with lots of companies in the UK who have big sales operations who want to generate quotes online for their sales team to then call them back and discuss their needs and give them something a little bit more personal. That could be in insurance, that could be in mortgages, loans, credit cards, home improvements, and then more and more so over the last 12 months, especially more e-commerce clients and direct-to-consumer businesses. People who really know their metrics and have quite aggressive growth targets with customer acquisition and give something very appealing on the front end. Whether that's a free trial, a free box, 3 months free, but they really know what their retention rates are, and they say, hey, if we can generate a customer for X on this first customer deal, and we know that our average LTV is Y, there's some kind of margin here, and we can scale that up. So yeah, historically financial services and lead generation, but more so D2C and e-commerce at the moment.
And is that like across all different countries? I mean, are you buying traffic in the States, the UK, and
a lot of English speaking? Yeah, that's what we do, because I think just because we're lazy and that's easy. We don't want to have the hassle of translating everything. So yeah, we do a lot of English speaking countries, so UK, US, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and it seems to be pretty similar across all of those. With varying degrees of I guess media costs. Some of the smaller, less developed countries, Australia, New Zealand, can be amazing from an advertising standpoint in terms of how responsive that market is to messages. But the markets are so much smaller. So, yes, you can probably find campaigns that do really well there, but there's kind of this glass ceiling of how much capacity there physically is.
Yeah. And without giving away the secret sauce of version 2, what would you say are some of the sort of golden rules that people should adhere to if they're embarking on any sort of native or intent-based sort of campaign?
The golden rule actually is that there isn't any golden rules. And that sounds kind of really stupid, but it really goes down to marketing fundamentals. We used to spend too much time in all of our ad platforms doing crazy kind of algorithms and things with our bids to, try and find, this kind of secret source of media buying, where we would say, hey, how about we do these amazing things where we're changing all our bids based on the historical data points. And, you can find marginal gains there. But you'll spend all your life kind of looking at the data and trying to do that, when actually, if you just create a better ad or a better user journey, that has a much bigger swing on the dial. So that's really it. It's looking at marketing fundamentals and saying, hey, what is the actual ad and what's the messaging and what is the kind of angle we're using here, and how do we improve upon that, and how do we get that across to the users in a more efficient way? Since we've been doing that and spending less time kind of really playing around with the geeky stuff, that's shown a much bigger improvement for us.
And presumably, like maybe a kind of fundamental would be thinking about not only where you're advertising and the message and things like that, but also presumably the advertisers themselves, right? If they're not working on a lead very quickly, then that is unlikely to be
100%. Yeah. In the lead gen world, there's certain givens which we always kind of try and educate with, and clients are usually pretty savvy these days. But if we're generating, real-time web leads where somebody's they've read quite a lengthy piece of editorial that we've produced around how it's a great time to remortgage at the moment. Our interest rates are really low and you can probably save yourself hundreds of pounds a month. And they complete an online form to say, hey, I want a mortgage quote and here's my details and here's my salary and this is what I'm earning and so on and so forth. And they just don't call them for 2 days. It's pretty dead at that point. So yeah, time to contact or time to first interaction is huge. And yeah, so that's something for sure.
And in terms of like the platforms that you're advertising on, you mentioned native platforms, but could you maybe just sort of expand on that a little bit in terms of, what are useful platforms for people to, reach consumers that within this environment?
Yeah, so for us, native platforms, and that's mainly Outbrain, Taboola, Yahoo, Gemini, and Google Discovery. They all do very similar thing, which is serve up sponsored content that looks like editorial content within news publishers. So they'll have widgets that sit below or around news articles, which is great because you're reaching users when they're at this kind of pause moment. They've read an article on the Mirror, they've got to the bottom of it, and they're very responsive as to what to read next. That's a natural break in the journey. So if you serve them something up that's quite appealing at that moment, your session times, your bounce rates, all of those kind of key metrics for content engagement is really good. So that's what we use a lot of historically is content marketing through native platforms. This year, we've got a real push to move out of that. We're still going to do that and we still do it well, but look at more of display, look at social. Basically, I've got kind of a bee in my bonnet that I don't want to be known as the guys who can do native really well, because we do that, but I don't want to be just doing that. For me, it's more about like content marketing. How do we use content to drive conversions and action online? And then we can place that content on any channel where we think the users are. And that could be native platforms, that could be direct publishers, that could be on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snap. The platform doesn't really matter. It's just how are we using content to drive conversions online. Yeah,
and that leads on to a really good point. Are you actually doing anything with influencers at the moment?
We've done bits, yeah. So we've done bits and pieces, mainly for some e-commerce products before Christmas. That worked really well. So we had influencers doing like box openings and things like that. They'd go on, we send them product, they'd open it, say how amazing it was, and do a mini review, and we'd use that almost as retargeting ads. That works really well. You have product ads on the front end, and then to really draw home that kind of trust and authority, you retarget those users with influencer messaging of them kind of using the product, and it kind of helps ease any fears or concerns.
And you'd be retargeting what, through Facebook and through Criteo and the retargeting?
Facebook mainly, yeah.
Facebook. So with sort of changes coming on, are you sort of affected by any of the kind of impending sort of regulations at the moment?
Good question. And the honest answer is we don't know. And anyone who says they know for sure is lying, because who really knows what Facebook are going to do, or what the updates on certain devices are going to do. For us, like native is really based on first-party data, right? So like Taboola or Outbrain, they have their widgets on publisher sites, and it's the physical code on those sites, and users are clicking on content served within those widgets. So it's first-party. Yeah. Therefore, any changes to third-party cookies or privacy laws doesn't really impact them, and their algorithms are still going to function. We'll still be able to find out, pretty quickly who's in market or who should be a potential customer. Facebook are going to be the ones to suffer. They get a lot of data points from outside the Facebook app, from other apps that send them signals, and that's going to be a real challenge. Less so for us, because again, we're mainly content and context based. We're not too deep into user interest, but I know there's certain companies, really going to struggle. And I think it's a good thing long term. I think there's been a huge trend over the last few years of marketers being a little bit lazy on Facebook, because Facebook algorithm is so good, right? It knows who your target customers are. If you set a fairly low budget with an average ad copy, chances are you're going to get some pretty good conversions and some CPAs. The difficulty is then scaling it out, because every time you scale it out, you're reaching an audience who Facebook think are less and less likely going to convert for your product. That data point that Facebook's losing is going to make it more difficult for those lazy marketers who don't really know who their target consumers are, who don't really, haven't honed in on their split testing and what the messaging should be, and have been reliant on Facebook just to have, millions of data points to say, hey, you're trying to sell X online, you want to reach customer Y. That's going to be interesting. For us, less so, because we're more about content and context than about, all of the historical browsing or data that these big tech platforms have.
So obviously, you've got your expertise in-house of knowing what works, and presumably there's a lot of knowledge that goes into, if you're buying in one sector, that you can use that knowledge and all the testing that you've, to translate to another client in that sector. And they're obviously going to benefit from your hard-earned dollars that you've spent testing and getting that data.
Yeah.
What other sort of parts of the tech stack do you use that you would encourage other marketers to look at, as part of, the general sort of stack for running a marketing agency or things that, would you consider?
For us, the 2 or 3 key things we use. One is a really solid kind of landing page builder, whether you do that in-house or your own dev team, but make sure every page you're running is quick. It sounds basic, but the amount of pages that we get sent from advertisers and we have to rebuild is crazy because they load really slowly. And it's like a historic thing. And, they load in 5 seconds, but on mobile, they'll load in 8 seconds. And if they're on not a great connection, that's now 12 seconds when the average user bounces after 3. And it's like, well, there's a huge trade-off there. So make sure that whatever you're using in terms of your marketing funnels are really light to serve. Don't have bloated images or any kind of crazy script running on the pages. Secondly, we plug in a proper tracking system so we can, pass lots of different parameters to our campaign optimization system and then look at like bounce rate, session times, not just at a campaign level, but at every sub-ID level. So we can see it by the connection, by the device, by the location, by any sub-parameters such as the ad ID or the site ID, really break down as to what's working and what's not, rather than just a CPA goal. Because I think lots of people are guilty of just saying, hey, we've got a CPA of £30. Let's run a campaign and test it at X amount of budget, and any placements over £30, let's cut. Well, that's crazy because you don't have to spend £30 if a placement's crap after £5. You can see, if site 123 has had 100 sessions, 0 LP engagement, 100% bounce rate, you probably know that you want to block that. You don't need to spend any more money. So that's what we do a lot of as well, is using tech to, I guess, make efficiencies in what we're doing rather than the tech running it. Is really just to automate the processes we do ourselves manually. Still have an eye on the whys. It's like, why is this working better? How can we improve it? All of those questions. I want humans involved. Tech's really just to make it as quick as possible. Yeah.
And obviously a loaded question from my side, but how are you guys finding Everflow is helping within your...
Yeah. So we moved to Everflow, I don't want to say December, maybe January, 3 or 4 months back, historically with Hassoffers, but loving the Everflow platform. So we use you guys really to track everything. We place Everflow tags with all of our advertisers. We're very reliant on the data that then goes through your platform. The direct linking functionality has been a game changer. So there's obviously challenges. On native, it's quite easy because the native platforms, you can get away with a lot that you can't get away with Google and Facebook. Google and Facebook, their policy is so strict that if you're running redirects, so redirect tracking, they're going to ban you, which is crazy because it's just a standard tracking mechanism. But obviously there's unscrupulous advertisers out there who use redirects to then send users to an uncompliant page. We don't do that. We just use redirects to track what's happening because it's a really effective way of tracking people. But your direct linking capabilities where you can, link people directly to the landing page URL and still get all the data that you're able to see is fantastic, and has allowed us to scale Facebook a lot quicker for sure.
And have you found that you've not only is it helped the performance of the campaign, i.e. that if a user is being redirected, you're not getting that click loss, as well as the not being allowed to redirect?
It's hard to really quantify it because you're right. For every redirect that happens, and we see some campaigns out in the wild that have hundreds. It goes through like a billion fucking redirects, and they don't know what they're doing there. But there's obviously click loss on each one of those. It's going to be minimal, but it happens. And when you're running performance at scale, it's the small margins that really make the difference. So if there's any ways that we can minimize people leaving, our pages throughout the journey just from simple tech fixes, then we are keen to hear about it.
So that makes sense. You've got, this sort of constant, continual improvement. These marginal gains that you talked about, the testing, having like that's really useful. The fast landing pages and thinking about the basics, and not just sort of going through and focusing on tiny little details, but really thinking about how things can have a big impact in terms of going to a landing page and all that kind of stuff. What are the kind of the big challenges? I mean, you and I have spoken before, and we've been in the industry a little while, where obviously like a big one is cash flow, right? If you're buying out on a CPC basis and getting paid from your advertisers like 90 days later, how do you square that circle? And is that one of the largest challenges that you see just generally of scaling?
I think it's a barrier entry to the smaller guys wanting to do what we do. And there's two ways there's a couple ways you can solve it. One, what we did was we raised some investment. So we raised capital to really cover that cash flow hole, because you're right, good advertisers pay you on net 30, sometimes net 60. So you got kind of 30 to 90 days here where you're not getting any money in. But to run media at scale and to really get media working at a level where you can make real kind of data-driven insights into the performance of a campaign and what to optimize on, you need to be spending thousands a day. Yeah. So you very quickly run up a kind of a multiple £100,000 hole in the business where you spent a lot of money and don't have any money coming in. That's a challenge. The other challenge with media, and especially last year, is as businesses which themselves really struggled for cash because they weren't open or weren't able to, pivot into online quickly enough. So I think the number one thing on that is vetting your clients really well and just being really kind of good with who you onboard and what they're trying to achieve, and genuinely think that you can help them and they can help you, rather than trying to take quick, easy money. I think there's agencies out there and there's clients out there who want to sell you kind of the dream in terms of what you're trying to do and what life is going to look like in a month from now. But often it's a little bit suspect. And you want to kind of, I guess, try and work with reputable brands who can actually pay you in 30 days time or 60 days time. And then as soon as you get it to some kind of meaningful result for them, negotiate on those terms. Like, you'll be surprised how even the big advertisers in the UK who spend a lot of money will pay you, bi-weekly or even weekly, because you're generating them new customers and they don't want that to kind of slow down. If you're generating them hundreds of new customers a day, you can kind of dictate your own terms a little bit.
Yeah, that's great advice. And also as well, capitalism, the only thing that makes capitalism bearable is the competition, right? So all of your advertisers are in competition with each other. And so I guess that's a great message to say to advertisers, is by having the flexibility to think about that cash flow for agencies that they're working with, that could make the difference conceivably, could it? For an advertiser that you choose to work with, if someone say we'll pay you net 60 and it actually turns out to be net 75, and someone that's paying you fortnightly, you're going to just...
Without minimizing risk, 100%. There's always going to be challenges, and there's always going to be, COVID was a great example. No one saw it coming, and there's certain advertisers or certain industries that really suffered because of it. And I'm sure there's bills that weren't paid. For us having, an advertiser on net 14 and having one on net 60, if all other things are equal, we'll always try and spend more with the one who's on net 14, just because it minimizes our business risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say, like the general sort of trends that you're seeing kind of within the space? I mean, it sounds as though if you want to expand beyond native, like, seems to me as though that might be an area that's growing and you want to kind of stay ahead of the curve and things like that. What general trends broadly speaking?
That's probably true. We want to expand beyond native, but I think for most digital performance marketers, they want to expand beyond Facebook, right? And the same thing happened 10 years ago with Google and PPC is, it's amazing. And then it becomes expensive. And then the competition, turns up and it becomes really difficult to make it work at the same levels. So having a diverse portfolio of kind of traffic drivers, I think is really important. And everyone saw it, in the last couple of years with Facebook. Facebook's got more and more difficult to make work at scale because there's more competition and CPMs rise. It's the same with any traffic source, really. So it's looking at how else you can target users. Lots of people are now, people who are traditionally Facebook media buyers are doing more native, and people who are doing native are trying to do more Facebook or TikTok or Snap. I think that's a trend that's only going to continue, is not being specialist for one particular source, but really just looking at who's a really good marketer or who understands kind of user journeys and personas and can translate that to online journeys. And then secondly for us is e-com and D2C. For me personally, I've not gone to a supermarket in months. I get my food delivered. I still go out on walks, take my dogs out. I go outside, but I don't feel the need to go down to the supermarket and trudge through the aisles. And even when we're open back out again, I don't think that's going to change. It's just so much easier to do your weekly shop online, have everything already in your basket. And yeah, you may want to swap the odd item here or there, but what you buy weekly is what you buy weekly. If you want to then go out and pop out and get some really good meat for the weekend or a nice bit of bread, you can do, but the basics is covered. And I think that kind of trend, but in most industries, people aren't going to suddenly go back to buying everything on the high street. So so businesses that really get that and play into that, I think, are going to do well.
Yeah. I mean, Shopify, I mean, it's just incredible, isn't it? I mean, I think I said this before, but, in the last sort of 7 to 8 months, probably about 50% of new clients at Everflow have been sort of through e-commerce. So we just see Shopify, WooCommerce, these shopping carts as just sort of increasing, the range. And just as you said, because a lot of these kind of large platforms, they get reach, they scale, they become very competitive, and then people want to try and obviously own their own methods of communicating with people. So do you think you'll ever get into building your own publisher sites or audiences?
We do a little bit. We don't build our own publisher sites. We have our own kind of lead generation websites where we have two options, right? Is advertiser A we can do the whole advertorial and the content journey and then direct the user to the advertiser's own website to then sign up and follow up with them, or we can collect that data ourselves. So we can put them through one of our own lead generation sites and API them the lead in real time. And there's pros and cons to both. For us, the pro is we own that data, so we can remarket that user other similar offers that they may be interested in the future. That has business value. For the client, that's great because it's one less thing to worry about, especially if the website isn't fit for purpose on lead generation. But there's also a familiarity there. If you do run to their website, there's that kind of brand interaction, so that we lose some trust by having it kind of third party. So there's pros and cons. But I think generally in lead generation, owning the customer in terms of the journey they're on and that data and having a one-to-one interaction is massive. And I think brands are going to look more seriously at how they in-house their own lead gen. Because of that, is you get all the benefits of DR and brand messaging on the front end. You can still have all your brand there, and you can still have really good messaging. But then collecting the lead, that fulfills a sales function where they can call them and sell them something. But anyone that aren't sold goes into your marketing team where they can then send them emails and follow-ups and do drip feeds and all this cool stuff. And I think it's kind of fairly underutilized at the moment, or has been a forgotten part of marketing for a little while. And going into your kind of Shopify thing, I think any agencies that are looking as what their niche is at the moment, focus on Shopify. Like you said, there's this hundreds, thousands of these Shopify stores popping up, and within 3 months doing $1 million in sales. But they all need support, and they may be able to sell something really well on Facebook. But then how can you as an agency go in there and own their email channel for them, or own their display channel, or look at their retargeting? If you can specialize in one specific thing for scale up Shopify brands, there's just such a big market to go after.
Yeah, and that's a great sort of segue into, do you see more specialization of what you're going to be doing, or is it sort of, because obviously you want to broaden out what you do, but is it continuing to sort of dial in on areas that you're good at and expanding those bits sort of horizontally rather than vertically, as it were?
Yeah, for us it's just all about content. So it's how we use content to drive action. And that's our specialism. So rather than being hey, we're the best Facebook media buyers in the world, we're kind of not, but we're really good at using content to drive conversions. So we want to do more of that. And then it's about how do we then take this content that's really successful on native and repurpose it for an audience that's not on native, whether on TikTok or Snap or wherever. It's and how do we partner with other agencies or other brands that we can get the most out of these new emerging platforms. So that's what we're going to do. Is we're not going to pretend that we're the best at all these different platforms, because we're just not. But we really know content and how to get people from A to B. So how do we partner up with other media buyers or other agencies who can then really work TikTok or Snap or Reddit or display or email, or there's hundreds of ways that you could reach potential users.
And how do you work commercially with your advertisers? Is it always on a cost per lead, or is it dependent on the client?
Depending on the client, it's 99% done on performance, so they'll pay us a cost per lead or cost per action or cost per app install, whatever it is. But that's really what we're about, is performance advertising. I'm happy to take the risk if we know there's scalability at the end of it. We won't ever take on a client unless they can scale to more than 1,000 a day in revenue through us, because it's just not worth the squeeze. We spend a lot of money in the first weeks or months really kind of honing in on what converts in terms of the articles and content we're using, the ads, the imagery, the targeting platforms. and we'll lose money. We'll lose thousands on that kind of first 2 weeks to a month. So only really worth it if the advertiser, once we get it working, can scale to more than £1,000 a day. And two, once it's working, the campaign isn't seasonal. It's very rarely that we'll run a campaign that's like, hey, it starts on March 14th and ends on March 31st. It's like, well, we don't have time to do anything. Like, all we're going to do is spend a load of our money and generate you a couple customers. That's kind of it. So that for us, it's performance based, but with always on campaigns that we can turn the taps on if we can hit the sweet spots in terms of performance for the advertiser and profitability for us. And it usually takes us about a month to kind of get there.
Yeah, that's such a good point, isn't it? The seasonality. And presumably when you say that, the ability for them to take leads, is that really the ability for them to work those leads, for want of a better word? As these leads are coming in, do they have a call center facility?
So most of the financial services clients we work with, have some kind of call center facility where, the leads are going in real time to their dialer or to their CRM, and they have a team who are outbound calling them saying, hey, you just completed our web form to get an insurance quote, here's your details, and we'll go through it all. That's great, and that's a really good sector for us. The challenge with it is it's obviously only live typically when call centers are open. Well, that's the times of most responsiveness. So if the call center is open from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m, there's really not much point in generating leads after 6 p.m. I mean, you can do, and they'll be called the following day, but you sacrifice some kind of contact rate and sale rate on those leads. So for us, finding e-commerce or app campaigns or D2C campaigns where we can have it 24/7 live, that's awesome, because we can really get our systems to work in terms of optimizations. We can keep everything live and just really get into the stuff that we love, which is like the whole version 2 stuff of split testing and saying, hey, we've been running this now, let's try and beat it, and the next day we'll try and beat that one, and the next day, and so on. And that's where we can get some good efficiencies. For sure.
And have you ever sort of come across, like, when you think of like a case study of these split testing, have you ever sort of come across something that has surprised you, how something so small could make such a sort of profound...
It happens all the time, and it's always the stupidest things. Like the article headline, we've had a advertorial, I think it was a life insurance client actually, had an advertorial, and we just changed the article headline. And to, I guess, an untrained eye, it was very similar. Only like 2 or 3 words changed in this headline, but the impact on conversion rate was 30%. So we had 30% more people converted because we added a tiny bit of emotion to the headline. And that was it. We just added a couple of emotive words. And I think, and we've been trying to do that a lot with our copy. And it's, again, being cognizant of the user and what they've just been reading. Most of native traffic is generated from tabloid newspapers, The Sun, The Mirror, Daily Mail, Metro, whatever, littered with emotion and kind of stories that really try and get people either to be very happy or very sad or very angry, or, they're very polarizing in how they write stuff, and they use emotion really, really well. So that's what we try and do within kind of boundaries and rules. But we try and add some emotion to our copy, especially in the first half before we really present the brand and the solution. When we're selling the pain points and, the subject that hopefully we're trying to get the user to resonate with and engage with, we'll try and use some emotion, and just adding a small bit of emotion to a headline. We saw like a 30% uplift in conversions.
That is fascinating, actually, So with, the business, how old is the business now? Did you say?
2 and a bit years. Yeah. So we started in January 2019.
Wow. Okay. And as you guys grow, like, where do you see things like video like being important to your business? Because, you mentioned emotion there, and obviously the moving image conveys emotion a lot more than the written text. Is that becoming an increasing part of your mix?
It is. It's not a huge of our mix yet, because we're still kind of really trying to find our feet on how we scale Facebook effectively. Native is still very, text and image in terms of, article based. Video, yes, we are doing bits with it on Facebook, and Facebook thinks, it works fantastically well. It's tough. Like in the US, they have VSLs, right? So like video sales landers. So it's like an infomercial, but on a website. And that's huge over there. And you sell like pharmaceutical products and neutral products via these VSLs. We don't get involved in that market at all. And it's just not a British thing. We're not used to having these very kind of aggressive infomercial style ads. That's one way people in the States are using video really well. For us, it's more about how do we use video on the front end in platforms that are used to displaying it. So when we do video, it's more Facebook and TikTok, because those are the platforms where you're seeing video and you're trying to do stuff. So yeah, more like influencer campaigns where they're doing unboxings and things like that, and just video to drive engagement and to get people to kind of stop the scroll more than video on the content itself.
Yeah, I think that unboxing is a great example of that, where people can feel the emotion as you open up your
it's that excitement and the intrigue. That's what I actually say with native. Native is all built around intrigue and urgency. That's the two things you've got to do right. To have a successful native campaign initially is intrigue the user, give them a reason to click on the ad and to then read the article. So you'll see, and the people who do this badly are the ones who get kind of coined with clickbait, is they get the intrigue, but it doesn't lead anywhere. It's just intrigue for intrigue's sake. So what we try and do is have intrigue so they read the copy, but then the skill is, and when you've got the hook in the copy, is then take them on a journey where they then take action. And usually that's around urgency. Is, hey, you've clicked on this thing, it's really intriguing, you've read it, and now there's some reason why you need to do it now, or there's some reason why mortgages, again, going back to that example, the interest rates at the moment, Bank of England is like 0.01%. It's like the lowest it's been in 300 years. There's urgency why you should remortgage now and not give it another 6 months, because you could get an amazing rate. So that's really kind of what native is built on, or successful native campaigns. Cool.
Yeah, very interesting. And then from your perspective, then what's the things, like, you as Joe, what have you learned in the last 2 years about like scaling a business? And we've seen, obviously, you guys on the Everflow platform, serious business, scaling up and all the rest of it. What's been the sort of big things that you've learned in this journey?
For me, I think it's how many people and how many businesses want to help if you just ask them nicely. Like, that's like the biggest bit of advice, I think. And I was always shy at that, for years. I always thought we had to do everything alone, and always thought we had to, in-house dev and, really plow your own furrow. And that's true to a certain extent. But if you're unsure on anything, just reach out to a business who's big in that space. And 9 times out of 10, they're more than willing just to help or to give you advice. And, and with you guys, that's a great example. If we're ever unsure of anything, we'll hit up your support team, and they're fantastic. And that goes the same, with whether it's native media buying, whether it's our tracking platforms, our landing page builder, whether it's you're looking to move into a new market and you're unsure really of the mechanisms you want to do there. There's lots of online groups, there's lots of forums that you can just post questions in, and people are just really open to helping people, which has been a pleasant thing. Yeah, for sure.
And continuing that aim of kind of helping people, what were some of the top forums that you would say are very useful sources of information for other people to?
So Facebook ad leaks and Facebook ad buyers are two groups that are really good. STM forum is good for kind of, I guess, more newer affiliates, just to looking at kind of different traffic sources. And there's some really good guides and walkthroughs on there. Those are the ones that we probably follow most.
Okay, excellent. And sort of broadly speaking, then, I mean, where it's a cliched question, but like, where's Version going to be in the next couple of years? Like, are you expanding internationally, or
I think yes, but what's really opened my eyes the last year or so is you don't need to be in these countries to be international. I've got a media buyer who at the moment is based in Istanbul. He travels the world with his laptop, and he's very successful and is a really good media buyer, but he doesn't have to be in Bath, and that's the same, I think. And a lot of the businesses, I think, have realized that in the last 12 months. And it's made me realize before I was quite hesitant to say, hey, let's really have a push in Australia because I don't have guys on the ground in Sydney. Well, that's just mental. We're a business, I think, that has skills that other clients may be interested in. Let's reach out to them and see if there's a partnership here. So for sure, we want to do more internationally. We do a lot in the UK at the moment. Most of our business is UK, but we are active in the States, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, a little bit in Canada, and we want to do more of that. And just not being on their time zone or having people there isn't really a barrier. People are so used to this, right? They're just so used to now jumping on the laptop and having a conversation over Zoom or Skype or whatever. It's just become much, much easier.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, we wish you continued success, Joe. Thanks for joining us on this chat. And we will see. And if people want to reach you, how do they find you guys?
version2.io is the website. Joe at version2.io is my email address. So feel free to reach out directly if you want to chat. Any kind of native tips or tricks, content marketing, here to chat. Or if you're, got a business that is looking for more leads or customers, I'm always willing to if we can help them, at least point in the right direction.
Awesome. Great. Thank you again. And we will speak to you soon.
Cheers, Zach. Thank you.
All right. Cheers.